Hello, my name is Lauren Weisner, and I am the current IRB manager at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. Today, I'm going to go over the different types of project review that an IRB application can go through, as well as ICJIA's internal review process. First, I want to briefly touch on the different IRB levels of review. As you can see here, there are 4 main categories of review that an IRB application can go through. The full board review is the most quote-unquote intense, with not research being the least intense. A full board review is for projects that are greater than minimal risk, where applications are reviewed by a convened IRB with all members present. An expedited review is for projects that are minimal risk, and the application is reviewed by the IRB chair or appointee. An exempt application is for projects that are not greater than minimal risk and are reviewed by IRB staff. And not research projects are projects that don't meet the federal definition of research and are reviewed by IRB staff. First, I'm going to discuss the general IRB review procedures at ICJIA. To submit an IRB application, you must first fill out an IRB template form. These blank IRB forms can be found on the IRB website, and there are forms for each different type of review. Please save your applications in the P drive, IRB applications for approval. When saving your project, please make sure that the application documents are clear as to what it contains. So please create a separate folder within the IRB applications for approval folder and name documents in a manner that is similar to what is shown below. In this example, you can see that the project title is Focus Court, and it is clear as to what each document is. I can tell that there is an initial application and attachments A through G, and each attachment has a title, so it's clear what is a consent form and what contains questions. It is also a good idea to place the date in the file name, because there are sometimes different iterations of the forms based on comments or questions you may receive from those in the reviewing process. So first we are going to discuss full board review. So full board reviews are reserved for projects that are deemed greater than minimal risk, where minimal risk is defined as the probability and magnitude of harm or discomfort anticipated in the research is not greater in and of themselves than those ordinarily encountered in daily life or during the performance of routine physical or psychological examinations or tests. If your project is deemed greater than minimal risk, then your application has to be reviewed at a fully convened IRB meeting, where the members can approve, disapprove, or require modification to your research. To go through this review process, you are going to fill out the template titled Initial, Expedited, and Limited Review Application. Be sure to include any attachments that are needed for your application. Once your application has been saved in the Applications for Approval folder, you will inform your manager that the documents are ready for review. Once your manager has reviewed and approved, you will inform the research director that the documents are ready for review. Once the research director has reviewed and approved, you will inform the IRB manager that the documents are ready for review. Once the IRB manager reviews and approves, they will let the IRB secretary know that the documents are ready for review. And once the IRB secretary approves the documents, they will inform the IRB manager, who will add them to the agenda for the meeting and send the documents to the members 1 week before the in-person meeting. Please keep in mind that it is recommended to simply keep all of the application documents in the P drive and not send documents back and forth. This is because there are generally some edits made along the way, and you want to make sure that you are sending the most up-to-date files. To go through the expedited review process, project must be minimal risk. While there are 9 research categories that can go through the expedited process, projects that are greater than minimal risk cannot go through this review. There are several Applicable categories to ICJIA. So the first one is Category 5. This is research involving materials that have been collected or will be collected solely for non-research purposes. This category refers to materials collected for non-research purposes, but can be used to cover research materials if the investigator's role is simply to analyze them. That is, if an investigator is receiving materials from colleagues who have separate approval to collect them, and the materials are handled with protections for confidentiality, the investigator may apply under this category. Under limited circumstances, research involving private information or specimens may be exempt or may not qualify as human subjects research. If the project is not human subjects research, IRB review is not required, and we will go ahead and discuss that a little bit later. Some examples under Category 5 are retrospective reviews of medical charts or analysis of specimens that contain identifiable information, such as name or medical record numbers. Category 6 includes collection of data from voice, video, digital, or image recordings made for research purposes. An example of this is using video recordings to examine communication styles between educators and students. Category 7 refers to research on individual or group characteristics or behavior, including but not limited to research on perception, cognition, motivation, identity, language, communication, cultural beliefs or practices, and social behavior, or research employing survey, interview, oral history, focus group, program evaluation, human factors evaluation, or quality assurance methodologies. An example of this would be interviewing teenagers about the influence of social media on body image. Category 8 refers to the continuing review of research previously approved by the convened IRB, where the research is permanently closed to the enrollment of new subjects, all subjects have completed all research-related interventions, and the research remains active for only long-term follow-up, or where no subjects have been enrolled and no additional risks have been identified, or where the remaining research activities are limited to data analysis. At ICJIA, we refer to this continuing review process as renewals. When submitting a project for expedited review, you will fill out the template titled Initial, Expedited, and Limited Review Application. If you are submitting a renewal, please fill out the template titled Renewal Application. When submitting your completed form, you will save it all in the P drive as discussed earlier. You will then email your manager and let them know that the files are ready for their review. Once your manager has reviewed and approved, you will let the research director know that those files are ready for their review. Once the research director has reviewed and approved, you will let the IRB manager know that those files are ready to be reviewed. Once the IRB manager reviews those and approves them, they will let the IRB secretary know, who will approve it, and then let the IRB manager know, who will send it to the IRB chair for review. Please remember again that at any time, someone along this review line may request some edits or changes or have some questions about your application. If you are interested in more detailed information about the expedited review process or the specific language that is used in the federal regulations, feel free to look up the OHRP categories of expedited review. The latest categories were outlined in 1998. These can also be found on our internal IRB website. Exempt review is again reserved for projects that are not deemed greater than minimal risk. There are 8 different categories of research that can go through the exempt review process, but much like expedited, not every single one of these categories is applicable to research that ICJIA conducts. The first applicable category to discuss is Category 2. This is research that only includes interactions involving educational tests, survey procedures, interview procedures, or observation of public behavior if at least one of the following criteria is met. The information obtained is recorded by the investigator in such a manner that the identity of the subjects cannot be readily ascertained directly or through identifiers linked to the subjects, or any disclosure of the human subject's responses outside the research would not reasonably place the subjects at risk of criminal or civil liability or be damaging to the subject's financial standing, employability, educational advancement, or reputation, or the information obtained is recorded by the investigator in such a manner that the identity of the human subjects can be readily ascertained, and an IRB conducts a limited IRB review. Limited IRB review refers to a process that is only required for under certain exemptions. This process does not require the IRB to consider all of the typical IRB approval criteria. Instead, the IRB must determine that certain conditions, which are specified within the regulations, are met. Limited IRB review may be done via the expedited review process. That is, it's typically reviewed by the chair or a designated IRB member, and under this review, continuing review is not required. While limited review is required under specific exemptions, it is not a very common process used at ICJIA. The next applicable category is Category 3. This is research involving benign behavioral interventions in conjunction with the collection of information from an adult subject through verbal or written responses or audio-visual recording if the subject prospectively agrees to the intervention and information collection and at least one of the following is met. A, the information obtained is recorded by the investigator in such a manner that the identity cannot be readily ascertained directly or through identifiers. B, any disclosure of the responses outside of the research would not reasonably place the subjects at risk of criminal or civil liability. Or C, the information obtained is recorded by the investigator in such a manner that the identity of the human subjects can be readily ascertained and an IRB conducts a limited IRB review. So within this category, benign behavioral interventions are brief in duration, harmless, painless, not physically invasive, not likely to have a significant adverse lasting impact on the subject, and the investigator has no reason to think the subjects will find the interventions offensive or embarrassing. An example of this kind of exempt research would be having participants solve puzzles under various noise conditions, where the various noise conditions are the benign behavioral interventions. Category 4 refers to secondary research for which consent is not required. That is, secondary research uses of identifiable private information if at least one of the following criteria is met. The identifiable private information is publicly available. The information is recorded by the investigator in such a manner that the identity of the human subjects cannot be readily ascertained directly or indirectly through identifiers linked to the subjects. The investigator does not contact the subjects, and the investigator will not re-identify the subjects. Or the research involves only information collection and analysis involving the investigator's use of identifiable health information. Or the research is conducted by or on behalf of a federal department or agency. An example of Category 4 research would be patient data extracted from medical records without name or ID, medical ID, every 6 months for follow-ups. Category 5 refers to research and demonstration projects that are conducted or supported by a federal department or agency. An example of a research project under Category 5 would be a study of barriers to obtaining Medicare benefits. Category 7 refers to the storage or maintenance for secondary research for which broad consent is required. Storage or maintenance of identifiable private information for potential secondary research use if an IRB conducts a limited IRB review and makes such determinations required. An example of a project under Category 7 would be creating a dataset with identifiers from a previous study for future research. Broad consent, as referred to within this category, is a consent form in which participants agree to provide this data for future research. So a broad consent form is provided to participants at the beginning of the study, and they agree to allow their responses or biospecimens to be used for future research projects. Category 8 refers to secondary research for which broad consent is required. Research involving the use of identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens for secondary research use if the following criteria are met. 1. Broad consent for the storage, maintenance, and secondary research use of the identifiable private information was obtained. 2. Documentation of informed consent or waiver of documentation of consent was obtained. And 3. An IRB conducts a limited IRB review. An example of this type of category would be using a dataset from a prior study that contains identifiers to answer subsequent research questions. To go through the exempt review process, you will fill out the template titled Initial, Expedited, and Limited Review Application, as well as the exempt application. Once your documents are saved in the IRB Applications for Approval folder, you will let your manager know that the documents are ready for review. Once approved by your manager, you will let the research director know that the documents are ready for their review. Once approved by the research director, you will let the IRB manager know that the documents are ready for review. Once approved by the IRB manager, they will send the documents to the IRB secretary who will review them. And if the IRB secretary approves them and deems the project as exempt, they will send out the documents to the IRB members who have 10 days to object to the exempt certification of your project. Many other IRBs do not require this 10 business days for review by the members. However, this is written into ICJIA's rules as of now, so this is the process we follow. For more detailed information on the different exempt review categories, feel free to look them up within 45 CFR 46. They can also be found on our IRB website. The last project type I'm going to discuss is projects that are not research. To be deemed human subject research, a project must first meet the definition of research. Research refers to the systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation, designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. Activities that meet this definition constitute research for the purposes of the federal regulations, whether or not they are conducted or supported under a program that is considered research for other purposes. Within this definition, generalizable knowledge refers to information that is expected to expand the knowledge base of a scientific discipline or other scholarly field of study and yield one or both of the following: results that are applicable to a larger population beyond the site of data collection or the specific subjects, or results that are intended to be used to develop, test, or support theories, principles, and statements of relationships, or to inform policy beyond the current study. If an activity does not meet the definition of research, it will not meet the definition of human subjects. That is because human subjects are defined as a living individual about whom an investigator conducting research obtains information through intervention or interaction with the individual and uses, studies, or analyzes the information or biospecimens, or obtains, uses, studies, analyzes, or generates identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens. So as can be seen here, just because a project involves humans does not necessarily mean that it meets the federal definition of human subjects research. Many researchers are faced with the issue of whether or not their project falls under human subjects research. So ICJIA's IRB has put together this helpful chart that goes over human subjects research and other project types such as program evaluation and quality improvement that are sometimes confused with human subjects research. The main question the researchers must ask themselves are, what is the goal of your project? If your goal is to produce new generalizable knowledge that contributes to the broader field of criminal justice, then your project is most likely going to fall under human subjects research. If your goal is solely a program evaluation goal, which means that your goal is simply to evaluate and improve a specific program or to inform a specific program, then your purpose generally falls under the program evaluation category. It is important to note, however, that program evaluations can fall within human subjects research. If your goal is to conduct something similar to a program evaluation, but make broader generalizable conclusions and contribute to the broader field of criminal justice, then your project is likely going to be considered a human subjects research project. This document can be found on ICJIA's IRB website, and I definitely recommend referring to it whenever you may have questions about your project and what category it may fall within. To go through the Not Research review process, you will first fill out the template titled Not Research. You will then let your manager know that it is ready for review. Once approved by your manager, you will have the research director review it. Once approved by the research director, you will let the IRB manager know that it is ready for review. Once approved by the IRB manager will let the IRB secretary know that it is ready for review, and if it is approved, the IRB secretary will sign it. Lastly, I'm going to cover some tips for the review process as well as filling out the different forms. So first, keep in mind that there are many and/or requirements within the exempt and expedited categories. So please be sure to familiarize yourself with these and be aware of what is required under each specific category. When filling out your forms, please be sure to include as much detail as possible. It is better to include more information than needed than not enough. Those that review your applications do not have all of the background information and knowledge that you do about your project, so you want to be sure that you're covering all of your bases and include the little details that you may not think are relevant. So for example, if you are going to do a project in which you will survey staff members of a criminal justice agency and you are going to email the staff a link to your Qualtrics survey, you would not just say in your application that you will simply email the link to the staff members. First, you need to clarify how you will get into contact with that program and how you will get the email addresses for the staff. Are you going to be in contact with the manager of the program? Is someone going to provide you with a list of staff members? Information like that is super important to include. Thirdly, I want to remind you to avoid emailing files back and forth. You simply want to have the files in the IRB applications for approval folder and have all edits made in there. And lastly, I recommend electronically signing your IRB applications after the signature from the reviewing party. So if the IRB chair has to sign it, please wait for them to sign it and then you can electronically sign the form. Sometimes with PDFs, we have had issues where if you sign it first, the reviewer can't sign it, and then it's a lot of technological issues. Lastly, I just want to direct you to some other resources that may be helpful in answering any questions that you may still have. So the first is ICJIA's IRB website, which is icjia.illinois.gov/IRB. This is going to have all of the forms that you may need, as well as any helpful documents or links for you to go ahead and do any outside research that you may want to do. Second is hhs.gov/OHRP. So this is where you can find the official guidance for the federal regulations. And lastly is 45 CFR 46, which is the exact federal regulations, and this is the exact wording that you will need to review and follow when submitting IRB applications.